Amy, and I got to say, I am really struck by the differing reactions over the weekend. People have had some time to let the Brexit vote sink in. The differing reactions from conservative intellectuals as compared to liberal intellectuals. Stephen Hayward has a great piece in Powerline blog, Brexit, the gift that will keep on giving. And he makes an interesting observation to highlight the hypocrisy of the left, saying, odd, isn't it, that liberals suddenly care more about Wall Street than they do about the workers in the union halls. Because it wasn't Wall Street that voted to leave the EU. It was, at least part of the coalition, the workers in those union halls. And where is the left, their putative protector, when it comes to voters choosing self-determination, voters they like to count among their constituents? Well, I think Christiane Amanpour, she explained the perspective of the left, as she is a person of the left. This is their explanation, nicely encapsulated in Amanpour's report about both what the motivation was and who was repudiated. As to the motivation, this is the only thing the left could conceive as the reason that people wouldn't listen to their enlightened perspective on the matter.
And what we're hearing, certainly from people who are worried precisely about this, is that they feel that this marks a victory for the kind of economic nationalism, to quote this article here, for the kind of xenophobia that will imperil the liberal world order that has guaranteed Western prosperity and stability since World War II.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'm reading from some experts, reading their opinions about Brexit. Brian Westbury, who's an accomplished free market economist. The bottom line is that investors should ignore scare stories about what would happen if Brexit wins. That is also echoed by Larry Kudlow, noted economist. Britain will regain its political freedom, its autonomous self-government, and its independence from a European Union spinning out of control under the power of establishment elites. And foreign policy experts like our guest, John Bolton, who's celebrating June 23rd, last Thursday, as British Independence Day. But those aren't the experts that matter. And I just want you to hear the rest of Amanpour's report, because these are the experts that matter, the people that on the left that tell you what to do and how to think. And if you cross them, even if you're a loyal voter of the left, even if you're a loyal constituent of the left, and they're having none of it.
Brexit has been peddled on an illusion. This is The Economist now. And that when reality interfaces with Brexit, it is going to make Britain, certainly in the short term, poorer, less innovative, less strong, going, as some people say, from Great Britain to Little England. So this is a moment of destiny that many, many people, the overwhelming preponderance of experts and independent analysts and allies of the UK and the scientists and the academics and the economists and the business and even the sports people, the overwhelming majority said, stay in the EU. The people wanted to do something different.
How could you not listen to David Beckham when it comes to matters such as these?
I know, sports people.
By the way, speaking of political novices being elevated at the expense of the experts, in Iceland, they had to replace their president, and a 40-something political novice history professor is the new president of Iceland. Seems like there's a real repudiation of the experts, not because you necessarily lack respect for their expertise in a chosen field of endeavor, but because you lack respect for them telling you how to think and live your lives. And it seems to me that was part of the repudiation with that vote on Thursday. But for more on this, we're now joined by the aforementioned former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Well, and so in your piece in the Boston Globe entitled Brexit Victory is a True Populist Revolt, you're positively celebratory, saying we should welcome Britain's departure from the EU. Happy Independence Day. Why are you saying that? Didn't you hear that all the left-wing experts say you're wrong?
Well, I think it's because the experts, it's not a rejection of their expertise, it's a rejection of their religion. And their religion is a religion of global governance. On a continental scale, at the European level, the European Union is the element of their theology, and they simply cannot understand. They cannot understand why anybody wouldn't want to live under a supranational government. So when people say, actually, we believe in self-government, not government by distant, unaccountable, opaque bureaucracies, These people just don't get it. And I think a lot of the negative reaction you're seeing in financial markets today comes from two basic reasons. Number one, all these financial geniuses made their investment decisions based on the theology. The peasants surely could not reject the European Union. And when they did, it's not the mistake of voting for Brexit that's causing this downturn. It's the mistake of the financial geniuses who didn't see it coming, number one. And number two, because they can't conceive of life outside the European Union, they think the consequence of Brexit has to be doom and gloom. And so now they're pessimistic about the future. Whereas, in fact, once Britain breaks free and can pursue its own economic policies, it can slash taxes, cut regulations, be open to foreign investment. You could see a real rebirth of the British economy. And not to go on too long, but here's one more point. Both on Friday and so far today, at least so far today, although the UK stock markets and the value of the pound are down, continental European stock markets in France and Germany and elsewhere are down even more. And what that tells you is what they're really worried about is not the fate of Britain once it leaves the European Union. They're worried about the European Union itself, and they should be, because there is enormous dissatisfaction all across the EU from populations, many of the same reasons that the British voters had. This is a failed idea. It's not that trade is a failed idea. It's not that commerce, investment, travel across Europe are a failed idea. What the failed idea is the institutions of European governance. That's what the Brits rejected, and that's what many people across Europe are on the process of trying to figure out how to reject as well.
Was there any solid aspect of the EU or the UK being in the EU? Was there one benefit for the people of Great Britain?
Look, at its origins, and for some period of time after that, the notion that the EU would be primarily a free trade area was a good idea, and everybody benefited from bringing down tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade. But honestly, the economic free trade area was never the central objective of the EU's founders. Their objective primarily was always political. They wanted to create the European superstate. They believed that it was the nation state that was the cause of war on the continent of Europe in the 20th century, so they wanted to eliminate the nation state. In fact, it wasn't the nation state that was a problem. Great Britain never had a problem as a nation state. It was totalitarian ideology, the Nazis, the fascists, the communists, that caused turmoil and conflict in Europe. But the EU's guiding intellectuals never saw that, and so their view was you need to get rid of these national governments and, by the way, these national characters and histories and so on, and replace it by one Europe. And that is what is under challenge here.
Yeah, and that's what roused the likes of former London Mayor Boris Johnson to support Leave. He wrote an op-ed over the weekend saying, I believe that the millions of people who voted Leave were also inspired by the belief that Britain is a great country and that outside the job-destroying coils of EU bureaucracy, we can survive and thrive as never before, while, also trying to kind of tamp down some of the hysteria being caused by those who didn't see this coming because they've got those blinders on. But that's the point. And so when you hear the reports about this as some kind of nationalist sentiment and that's supposed to be received with a negative connotation, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative connotation. It's not the rise of nationalism a la Nazi Germany, which seems to be some of what is being implied by the left.
Yeah, well, look, I would just describe what happened in Britain as an expression of patriotism and a feeling. I mean, I know this sounds heretical to many people, particularly on the left, but those British people actually think they can govern themselves. Right. Thank you very much. Oh. They don't need assistance from European bureaucrats in Brussels. And, actually a lot of other people in other European countries think the same thing. There was a poll in Sweden announced on Wednesday before the vote that asked the Swedes, if the British vote to leave the European Union and that option were given to you here in Sweden, how would you vote? A substantial majority of Swedes said they would vote to leave as well.
Wow. So do you see a domino effect happening in places like France, Sweden, other countries backing out of the EU?
Well, I think it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen at this point. I think in 5 or 10 years there will still be something called the European Union, but I think it's going to look very, very different. And I think Britain's withdrawal also has a very positive effect for the United States in terms of the NATO alliance. I have an op-ed in the New York Post this morning on that point, because the European Union, politically and militarily, over the last several decades, has been less than the sum of its parts. The European Union is a value-subtracting entity, not a value-adding entity. So I think from the perspective of continental defense and really the broader defense of the North Atlantic area, I think Britain's exit is entirely positive for the United States.
And can't the UK position themselves much like Norway does with the European Union, where you kind of go back to what was originally conceived to be, which is trade agreements, kind of a free trade zone with some autonomy beyond trade? And shouldn't the U.S. do something similar, as immediately engage the UK in kind of bilateral trade agreement?
Yeah, I think Obama was dead wrong when he threatened the Brits when he was over there recently, saying, "You'll go to the back of the queue." By the way, what American ever says it like that? But we should immediately move to negotiate a free trade agreement with Britain. I think we should do whatever we need to do to stand with our ally on this point. And I think there's a potential here for a real revival of the British economy, and America stands to benefit from that.
I want to get your insight on another matter. Over the weekend, another incident of radical Islamic terrorism. This apparently from the al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab terrorist group in Somalia, where 14 are reported dead after they stormed a Somali hotel in Mogadishu. And kind of what we should make by the continued existence and activity of lesser players in the arena of radical Islamic terrorism like al-Shabaab?
Well, I think it's a demonstration that the terrorist threat worldwide continues to grow. You know, just because they don't look terrorists, but they're in different groups. There's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, there's Hamas, which is a terrorist group, Hezbollah, Boko Haram, al-Shabaab, with shifting loyalties and allegiances. The fact that it's not one central galactic terror headquarters and enterprise shouldn't make us feel good. The fact is that the tide of terrorism is rising. This is just another example of it. The Obama administration's own director of national intelligence testified openly before Congress some months ago that the terrorist threat is equal to or greater than what it was before 9/11. The Obama administration and Hillary Clinton are still living in a dream world on that. And I think this is something that's got to be at the center of the debate as we head toward November here.
All right. He is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, now a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, has a couple of good op-eds the last few days, one in the Boston Globe on Brexit, and one in the New York Post today, as you mentioned, on Brexit as well, in part. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey .pro answer line.